Okay, I've been wanting to do gear reviews on here for a while. I just haven't gotten around to it, and now I'm going to get around to it. The first one I'm going to do is on my custom Z alto and tenor saxophones. The alto I've had since like end of high school, which was about almost 6 years ago now. So that gives you an idea of how old I am, I suppose. The tenor I've had for a year and a half. Although it feels like 5 years and 0 at the same time, because I hardly have had any performing experiences with this, because I bought it in September, and then March everything shut down, so I haven't really had to play it out in the wild really yet. So I'll give you an overview of these horns, and then get into some specifics, and then get into why I like them, and pros and cons, and who these are for. If you want to see me playing these, there's a bunch of videos that I'm playing the horns, so I'm not going to play them today, but I'm just going to go over them and give you a review of them. So these are a professional instrument. They're different from the 62. They're a little bit upgraded from the 62, but they're based on the 62 design, and they are different from the EX, which is more of a classical-oriented horn, I suppose. The EX comes from a different family of Yamaha. It's a little bit different design, but the Custom Z kind of comes from the 62 family. It's just kind of a supercharged version of the 62. These are primarily preferred by jazz players over the EX, but you can certainly play the Custom Z in a classical concert setting. I played this Custom Z alto in undergrad, and it performed very, very well as a classical instrument. So it's not like it's just one-dimensional at all, far from it. Again, these are based on the 62, but they're somewhat improved. Have a little bit different features, a little bit more high-end, has a little bit more of a complex sound than I think the 62 did. But in that same vein, meaning all the perks of the 62 you get with this is just better. But the bore design is the same, the key work is the same as the 62, so if you're coming from one of those, or you're coming from a Mark 6, it's easy. It's not like some of the Taiwanese horns, the left hand feels a little bulky to me, and these aren't like that. These come in 4 regularly available finishes. The standard lacquer, silver plate, which both of these are silver plated. It also comes in black lacquer with gold keys, which is absolutely stunning, and unlacquered. There are also 2 rarer finishes that I think I know of. One is the vintage bronze. I think they only made 50 of them for Yamaha's 50th anniversary, and those are also stunning as well. They also, I think, make gold-plated versions of these, or at least they make gold-plated versions of the EX. I think they make gold-plated versions of the Zs also, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Let's get into some of the features of the Custom Z that make it unique and special. So these have metal resonators on the pads instead of plastic, with the 62 having plastic. I think the EX also has plastic, but the metal resonators make the sound a little bit brighter, has a ringing kind of a quality to it. It's really unique. Not very many saxophones have the metal resonators that I know of. See if I can show you. If you can see in the key cups, the resonators are metal. Both of these have a one-piece bell design, which means this entire bell section here is made from one piece of brass rather than 2 that's soldered together. That gives it a better low-end response, and I think it actually does, in my opinion, a little bit better. I had a 62 tenor before this, by the way, so that's why I kind of know the differences. And the low-end response definitely is a lot better than the 62 on these horns, which is nice for me because I have always had a problem with low-end response in my playing, so it kind of helps me. I guess it's a little bit of a crutch, but oh well. The key work is identical to the 62 and nearly identical to the Mark 6, so if you're coming from a Mark 6 and you want like a modern or alternative or a backup, these are really great because the keys are pretty much in the exact same spot. There's no like relearning you have to do with where all the palm keys are and how big it feels in your hands and stuff. Like I said before, some of the Taiwanese horns like Cannonballs and P. Moriarty's, the left hand feels to me a little bit too big. They're a little bit too far away, especially this guy here, the G's, always feel a little bit clunky to me, and the palm keys are all in different spots. But with these, they're the same spots as a 6 and all the other Yamahas. So if you're coming from any of those and want to upgrade to this or get something different, that'll be really easy for you. These have blue steel springs, which the 62 also has, and that helps with the key work and the feel and the response of the keys, makes it easier to play fast. The key work feels really great on these. I've always thought that they're probably the best ones that I've ever felt. I've played lots of horns. I've played Cannonballs and P. Moriarts and Mark 6s and all sorts of stuff, and these always feel the best under my fingers. They also have real mother-of-pearl buttons, which to me feel a lot better than the plastic because they don't slide around so much. You can grip them a lot easier than the plastic. They have more of a tactile feel to them. And these come standard with a V1 neck, which is wider in taper than the 62 style or the G1 neck that the 62s and most other Yamahas come with. Back when I had my 62, I swapped out a V1 neck for the old G1 neck, and I put them like side by side. You could definitely tell that the V1 neck was definitely visibly wider taper at the cork than the G1 neck was. That helps with flexibility. It gives you more of a spread sound, a little bit better for jazz. It does slightly hamper the intonation though, so if that's a problem for you, and then probably you don't want the V1 neck, you want to swap it out for something that's a little narrower. A G1 or a C1 or E1 are all narrower tapers. Doesn't mean it's a smaller sound, it's just a little bit more controllable, but I kind of like that more spread like sound. It helps fill the room a lot better than the other necks. So who is this saxophone for, primarily? Kind of alluded to this already. This is probably most likely for the player who wants the best modern horn that I think you can buy, or at least one of the best. It's probably a little bit brighter sounding, again, than the 62 or the EX. So jazz and commercial players really like these things, but they can definitely work in any situation. They take your air really well, and they're very responsive to what you're doing with the horn. So let's talk about the price for a minute. So the price of these is, for the standard lacquer alto, is about $42.99, and then all the other finishes are $44.99. For the tenor, the standard is $48.99, and then the unlacquered is $51.99, and the silver and gold are $53.99. Although I think I got this for $52. I think I talked the guy down about $200. Not cheap, but not like super expensive. Like modern Selmers are just way too expensive. These are pretty much in the ballpark for what you want to spend on a professional horn new. I'll talk about it a little bit. I think they're maybe a tad overpriced new, and the market reflects that. When you see them used, they're definitely lose a little bit of value used, but maybe not the silver ones, because I don't think you see the silver ones very often, but that's another story. So let's get into some pros and cons of this saxophone. There's probably obviously going to be a lot more pros than cons, because I own them and I like them, so obviously it's not going to be like I'm hating on these things or anything, because I spent $10,000 worth of instruments on here, so I obviously like them. Probably the biggest pro is these are probably the most in-tune saxophones I've ever played, and that anyone probably has ever played. Some people actually don't like them because they're so in tune, but you hardly have to adjust for anything. I remember when I got this alto, I was playing a 23 alto, like a student one, before I got that one at the end of high school, and I was so surprised on how little I had to adjust for intonation. It was almost like I had to relearn where all the notes were, because I was adjusting so much with that other one. And then with the Z, it was just, everything was bang on in tune. It was really crazy. Another pro is build quality. These things are built to last. They're built like a tank. They're really sturdy and strong, so you won't have any problems with repairs. And when you do need to have it adjusted, it's really easy. Lots of techs know how to work on these, and they're really easy to maintain. At least the gold plate. The silver plate is different, but I'll get to that in a minute. And they don't come out of adjustment very often, and when they do, it's really easy to fix by any repairman with any level of skill. So your repairman will be happy. Not that that's a reason to buy anything, but that is something to keep in mind. Upkeep costs will be down compared to a vintage horn, or compared to some of the other ones that maybe aren't made quite the best. Another pro, I think, is the sound. I think these have a really unique sound to them. They're not like anything else I think out there. It definitely has a more modern punch, not that core punch that the Selmer Mark 6s and the modern Selmers have. It's definitely a different sound from that, but I think it sounds great, and it's really unique, and it gives somebody, I think, a really unique voice not just the same old, like, Mark 6 and auto link setup that everybody plays. These horns are very even throughout the register. That's another pro. All the way from low B flat up until the altissimo, everything is even, and you don't need to drastically change your air pressure to get certain notes out. It all just kind of flows, and it's very fluid feeling. These are very versatile saxophones, I think. They're not horns that tend you in one direction or another, but they are very good at responding to you and the air that you put in, and also the setup that you have. So they don't just box you into one kind of sound. You can play any kind of sound on it. So there are some cons to owning this horn. Not many, but there are a few that I've come across in the combined, 7 or 8 years of playing these. The first one is, this is more specific to the silver plating, but it does tarnish very easily, and the unlacquered does as well. But I just have experience with the silver plate. It gets that kind of black tarnish. If you've ever had like silver jewelry or silverware, obviously, that you have to keep it up or it'll tarnish. And you can clean it. I actually cleaned these, both of these horns yesterday. So that's kind of nice that they're not as gunky looking as they were. The tarnish doesn't affect the sound. It doesn't eat into the metal or corrode anything or make it play worse. It just kind of looks gross, and you'll get like bad looks from your repairman if you come in and it's all tarnished, especially if you leave your horn out of the case, which I tend to do a lot. But you can clean it. It does take a little bit of work, but you can clean most of it out and it can look a lot better. If you're going to buy the silver ones of these, it does take a little bit more upkeep than just your regular standard lacquer or black lacquer. The unlacquered kind of gets that green stuff on it, which is the same thing. It's just brass oxidization rather than silver oxidization. I don't know about how to keep those up because I don't have those, but I've heard that from other people that the unlacquered ones tend to kind of get a little gunky too. Another con, which maybe not a con depending on who you are, but this is not a Mark 6. These are not Mark 6s. They do not sound like Mark 6s. They do not play like Mark 6s. So if you want a modern Mark 6, that's not what this is. And don't expect that. And if you expect that, you're going to be disappointed. These do not play anything like those horns in my experience. They're completely different. They're good. They're great. I prefer them. But if you prefer that Mark 6 vintage sound, then these are probably not for you. It doesn't have the core that a Mark 6 has. It doesn't have that same compact sound. It has a more spread sound. It's more of a modern sound. A good sound, but not a vintage sound. The third con, I think, and again, this is kind of subjective, but I think the price. I think these are a little bit overpriced for what they are. They're great and wonderful saxophones, but they are basically a supercharged 62. I don't think they command the $2,000 price hike from those. I don't think they're quite that much better. For me, it was worth it, but I don't think for most people it would be worth it. But it's not like it's a huge overpriced. I mean, I think if these were about $500 less, they'd probably be fine. Maybe $3,500 for the alto and $4,000 or $4,500 for the tenor, I think is appropriate. Especially when you consider like brands like Eastman and P. Moriarty especially are offering some really great saxophones that are about $1,000, $1,500 less than these. And they're not really that much worse in terms of build quality and quality of sound and construction and that kind of thing. They're different from these. They tend to play more like the vintage horns than these do, but they're not worse. I think these are a tad bit overpriced for what they are, especially when the 62, I think you can get a 62 alto for under $3,000, tenor for under $4,000, and then used, then that's a whole nother ballgame, right? They're not unreasonably priced either. It's not like the Selmers, which are $8,000, $9,000, which I think is just insane. At that point, you might as well buy a 5-digit Mark 6 and be done with it. I don't understand why there's so much money. It's not that bad, but I think they're just a tad on the pricey side for what they are, which is great, but not quite $2,000 above what a 62 can offer you. At least for most people. For me, it was, but not for most people, I don't think. The bottom line, I think, is these are great horns for anybody looking for probably the best modern saxophone that money can buy, at least in my opinion. And they're great for anybody looking for that, looking for maybe a brighter sound, a more resonant sound, a sound that'll fill the room, and maybe something unique that not everybody has. Lots of people have the Zs, but If you go to a jam session, you're probably going to be the only one with one of these things. And if you want to stand out, then this is something to do to stand out with. Feel free to put your thought down there in the comments and stuff. And I'll do some more reviews, I think, later, but this has gone on pretty long, so I'm going to sign off and see you next time.